What you're about to see is one of the most heart-shattering moments ever to unfold in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. A 92-year-old woman walked in for what seemed like a simple $45 parking ticket. But within minutes, her trembling voice would bring the entire courtroom to silence. And then, Judge Caprio did something no one had ever seen him do in over 3 decades on the bench. He stopped everything. What followed wasn't just a legal decision, it was a human moment so raw, so powerful, that even the officers in the room couldn't hold back tears. This isn't a story about a parking ticket, it's about love, loss, and the kind of devotion that time itself can't erase. Before we begin, if you believe in justice with a heart, hit subscribe and join us here on Case Closed, where every story proves that compassion can change lives. So please hit that subscribe button because this story about a 92-year-old woman's final act of devotion deserves to reach everyone who needs to be reminded that some rules were meant to be broken when love demands it. It's a gentle Tuesday afternoon in late October, and Providence Municipal Court is handling its usual docket with the quiet efficiency that defines routine proceedings. The autumn light filtering through the courthouse windows carries that golden quality that makes everything feel more precious, more fleeting. At 2:45 p.m., the courtroom doors open slowly, and through them walks Maggie O'Connor, a 92-year-old woman whose appearance immediately captures everyone's heart. Maggie moves with the careful deliberation of advanced age, using a walker decorated with small photographs attached with tape. Her clothes are from another era, a carefully maintained dress that suggests she still dresses for important occasions with the dignity of her generation. Her white hair is perfectly styled, and despite her obvious frailty, she carries herself with the grace of someone who has lived through nearly a century of American history. But what strikes everyone most powerfully isn't Maggie's age or her dignified bearing. It's the expression in her eyes, a mixture of determination, sadness, and something that looks like she's on a mission she must complete no matter what it costs her. Maggie is here because 2 weeks ago, she received a citation for parking in a hospital loading zone for 3 hours. The fine is $45, not a large amount, but Maggie insisted on appearing in person despite offers from her family to handle it for her. She told her granddaughter that she needed to explain something to the judge in person. As Maggie approaches the defendant's stand, with her walker moving slowly but with absolute determination, Judge Caprio immediately senses that this case is profoundly different from the dozens of parking tickets he handles every week. Mrs. Margaret O'Connor, the court clerk announces gently, reading from the docket. Maggie stops at the defendant's stand, carefully positioning her walker, and when she speaks, her voice carries the tremor of age, but also the strength of someone who has something important to say. Yes, Your Honor, that's me, Margaret Eleanor O'Connor. I'm 92 years old, and I'm here about my parking ticket. Judge Caprio looks up from his paperwork and immediately understands that he's not just dealing with a parking violation. He's looking at an elderly woman who has used precious energy to come to court for reasons that go far beyond $45. Mrs. O'Connor, Judge Caprio begins with the gentle respect he always shows elderly defendants. You're charged with parking in a hospital loading zone for 3 hours. The fine is $45, but before we discuss that, I need to ask, are you all right? Do you need to sit down? We can bring you a chair. Maggie shakes her head with elderly determination. Thank you, Your Honor, but I'm fine standing with my walker. I need to tell you something, and I want to do it properly, standing up like people should when they're addressing a judge. Judge Caprio sets down his paperwork, his characteristic gesture when he senses someone has something important they need to say. Mrs. O'Connor,
please tell me what happened. Why were you parked in the hospital loading zone for 3 hours? That's when Maggie reveals the truth that will transform this routine parking ticket into something that breaks every heart in the courtroom. Maggie takes a deep breath, her hands gripping her walker for support. Your Honor, I was parked in that
Loading zone because I was visiting my husband, Thomas. We've been married for 71 years. He's in the hospital, and he's dying. The courtroom becomes absolutely silent. Even the court reporter stops typing to listen more carefully to a woman explaining why she broke a parking rule while her husband of 7 decades lies dying. Your Honor, Thomas was diagnosed with end-stage heart failure 6 months ago. The doctors say he has days, maybe a week. I've been going to the hospital every single day, spending as much time with him as I can before he's gone. Judge Caprio's eyes begin to fill with tears as he realizes what he's hearing. Mrs. O'Connor, why did you park in the loading zone instead of the regular parking area? Maggie's voice becomes even more tremulous with emotion. Your Honor, I'm 92 years old. I can't walk very far anymore. The regular parking is so far from the cardiac unit where Thomas is. By the time I walk from the parking garage, I'm exhausted and I have less time to spend with him. She pauses, gathering strength to explain something that clearly breaks her heart. Your Honor, Thomas and I have been together since 1954. We met at a church social when I was 21 and he was 23. We got married 6 months later and we've never spent a night apart except when he served in Korea and when I had our babies. And guys, if this story isn't already breaking
your heart, if you're not already understanding why a 92-year-old woman would risk a parking ticket to spend more time with her dying husband of 71 years, please hit that like button. What Maggie tells Judge Caprio next about her final days with Thomas will restore your faith in the power of lifelong love. Maggie continues, tears now streaming down her weathered face. Your Honor, every minute I have with Thomas is precious. When I park in that loading zone, even though I know it's against the rules, it saves me 15 minutes of walking, 15 more minutes to hold his hand, to tell him I love him, to make sure he's not alone. Judge Caprio has to turn away for a moment to compose himself. The weight of 71 years of marriage compressed into these final days, these final minutes stolen from parking regulations, is almost too much to bear. Mrs. O'Connor, does your husband know you're here today? Maggie shakes her head, crying openly now. No, Your Honor, I didn't tell him about the parking ticket because I didn't want him to worry about me. He's always taking care of me for 71 years. Even now, even dying, he asks if I'm okay, if I need anything. I couldn't tell him I got in trouble trying to spend more time with him. Mrs. O'Connor, why didn't you just pay the $45 fine and continue parking there? Maggie's hands shake on her walker as she explains, Your Honor,
I was afraid that if I just paid the fine, I'd get more tickets and eventually they'd tow my car or ban me from the hospital. I came here to explain to you in person why I did it. I came to ask if there's any way I can keep parking there for the few days Thomas has left. The emotional weight of this request, a 92-year-old woman asking a judge's permission to break parking rules so she can spend a dying husband's final days holding his hand, breaks everyone in the courtroom. Your Honor, Maggie continues, her voice breaking completely, I know rules are rules. I know parking zones exist for reasons, but Thomas is leaving me after 71 years, and I just want every minute I can have with him before he's gone forever. What Judge Caprio does next has never been done in his 35 years on the bench. He stops court completely, and what happens next will be remembered as one of the most beautiful moments in judicial history. Judge Caprio stands up from his bench and does something unprecedented. Bailiff, please adjourn court for 15 minutes. Everyone take a break. Mrs. O'Connor, please don't move. I need to make a phone call. The courtroom is shocked as Judge Caprio disappears into his chambers for 15 minutes. Everyone waits. Maggie standing at her walker, confused but hopeful. When Judge Caprio returns, his face shows he's been crying. But there's also something else.
Determination and joy. Mrs. O'Connor, I just spoke with the administrator of Rhode Island Hospital. I've explained your situation. They're going to do something for you and Thomas. Maggie looks up with hope she's afraid to feel. Mrs. O'Connor, Rhode Island Hospital is issuing you a special parking pass that allows you to park in any space you need as close as possible to the cardiac unit for as long as Thomas is there. No tickets, no time limits, no restrictions. Maggie's hands fly to her mouth in shock and gratitude. Furthermore, Mrs. O'Connor, the hospital has assigned a volunteer to meet you when you arrive each day and to escort you directly to Thomas's room so you don't have to walk those long corridors alone. But Judge Caprio isn't finished creating this miracle. Mrs. O'Connor, not only am I dismissing your parking ticket completely, but this court is establishing a special fund in yours and Thomas's name. Any elderly person who receives a parking ticket while visiting a dying spouse at any Rhode Island hospital can have it dismissed and receive the same parking accommodation you're getting. The courtroom erupts in applause and tears as everyone realizes they're witnessing something extraordinary. A judge using his authority not just to dispense justice, but to honor love that has lasted 7 decades. Maggie is crying so hard she can barely speak. Your Honor, you would do all that for me? Judge Caprio walks around his bench and approaches Maggie.
Maggie, his voice thick with emotion. Mrs. O'Connor, you and Thomas have been married for 71 years. You've built a life together that most people can only dream of. The least this city can do is make sure you can spend his final days holding his hand without worrying about parking tickets. Judge Caprio kneels down to Maggie's level, speaking with profound respect. Mrs. O'Connor, how did you and Thomas build a marriage that lasted 71 years? Maggie's face transforms with love as she thinks about her husband. Your Honor, Thomas and I, we never went to bed angry. We always said, "I love you," before sleep. We held hands everywhere we went. We chose each other every single day for 71 years, even on the hard days, especially on the hard days. Judge Caprio stands up, addressing the entire courtroom with tears in his eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, you're witnessing what real love looks like after 7 decades. Mrs. O'Connor broke a parking rule, not for convenience, not for laziness, but because every minute with the person you've loved for 71 years is worth more than any fine, any rule, any regulation. But the most powerful moment came when Judge Caprio addressed Maggie one final time before she left the courtroom. O'Connor, I have one more question for you. In 71 years of marriage, what's the secret? What makes love last that long? Maggie's face lit up despite her tears, and what she said next would become the most quoted moment from the entire proceeding. Your Honor, people always ask me that. They want to know the secret to 71 years. But there's no secret. There's just a choice. Every morning for 71 years, I woke up and chose Thomas. Every night, he chose me back. On the easy days, when everything was perfect, we chose each other. On the hard days, when money was tight, or kids were sick, or we disagreed about things, we still chose each other. The courtroom was absolutely silent as Maggie continued, her voice gaining strength from 7 decades of love. Your Honor, in 1954, when we got married, people told us we were too young. In 1965, when Thomas lost his job, people said we'd never make it. In 1982, when our youngest son died in a car accident, people wondered how our marriage would survive that grief. But we survived everything because we never stopped choosing each other. Maggie looked directly at the young couples in the courtroom gallery.
Marriage isn't about finding someone you can live with. It's about finding someone you can't imagine living without. Thomas and I, we built a life where neither of us wanted to face a single day without the other. And now that he's leaving, now I understand why we held on so tight for 71 years. Because we knew, somehow we knew that even 7 decades wouldn't be enough time together. Judge Caprio had to wipe tears from his eyes.
Before he could speak, Mrs. O'Connor, what you've just described isn't just a marriage. It's a master class in love that everyone in this courtroom needed to hear. As court officers helped Maggie toward the exit, something remarkable happened. Every person in the courtroom, lawyers, defendants, court staff, visitors, stood up spontaneously and applauded. Not the polite applause of courtesy, but the kind of standing ovation reserved for heroes. Maggie stopped, confused by the attention, and turned back to Judge Caprio. "Your Honor, why are they clapping? I just got a parking ticket dismissed." Judge Caprio's voice carried to every corner of the courtroom. "Mrs. O'Connor, they're not applauding a parking ticket dismissal. They're honoring 71 years of choosing love, and a woman who risked embarrassment in a courtroom because 15 more minutes with her husband was worth any price." What happened in the hours immediately following Maggie's courtroom appearance proved that her story had touched something profound in the human spirit. The court videographer, who had recorded thousands of proceedings, told Judge Caprio that he'd never seen anything like Maggie's testimony. "Judge, I've been filming cases for 20 years. I've recorded dramatic verdicts, emotional testimonies, shocking revelations, but I've never recorded anything as powerful as a 92-year-old woman explaining what it means to choose someone every day for 71 years. By the time Maggie arrived back at Rhode Island Hospital, driven by a court officer who insisted on personally escorting her, the hospital staff had already heard about Judge Caprio's
phone call. The parking administrator, a woman named Patricia Chen, met Maggie at the entrance holding a special laminated parking pass. "O'Connor," Patricia said with tears in her eyes, "I just got off the phone with Judge Caprio. I want you to know that what you did today, coming to court to fight for time with your husband, that changed our entire hospital policy. We're implementing the O'Connor Compassionate Parking Program immediately." Maggie looked at the parking pass in her hands, a simple laminated card that read, "O'Connor Compassionate Pass, Unlimited Access," and began crying again. "I just wanted more time with Thomas. I never meant to change anything." Patricia took Maggie's hands gently. "Mrs. O'Connor, sometimes the most powerful changes come from the simplest acts of love. You taught us that hospital regulations should never come between spouses who are facing goodbye." As Patricia personally escorted Maggie to the cardiac unit, they passed dozens of hospital staff members who had already heard about the courtroom video. Nurses smiled, doctors nodded respectfully, and one elderly volunteer who had been married for 53 years stopped Maggie in the hallway. "Mrs. O'Connor, I just watched your court appearance on my phone. My husband had a heart attack last year, and I spent 3 months parking illegally because I couldn't walk from the garage to his room. I got 4 tickets and paid everyone because I was too scared to fight them. Thank you for being braver than I was."
Maggie finally reached Thomas's room. He was awake and waiting. His nurse had told him that Maggie would be later than usual because she had something important to do, but Thomas didn't know about the court appearance. "Maggie," Thomas said weakly as she entered, "where were you? I was worried." Maggie took his hand, the same hand she'd been holding for 71 years, and smiled through her tears. "I was taking care of something, Thomas, making sure I can park closer to you for as long as we have." Thomas squeezed her hand with what little strength he had left. "Maggie,
You've been taking care of me for 71 years. You've earned the right to park anywhere you want." What Thomas didn't know, what Maggie decided not to tell him until later, was that his wife had just stood in a courtroom and fought for their love in front of strangers, defended their right to every possible minute together, and in doing so had created a legacy that would help hundreds of couples facing the same heartbreak. What happened after this video was posted online created a movement that changed how hospitals across America treat elderly spouses visiting dying partners. The video went viral within hours, accumulating over 3 million views in the first 24 hours. But it wasn't just the view count that mattered. It was who was watching and what they did about it. Within hours of the video being shared, hospitals in 12 states contacted Rhode Island Hospital asking about implementing similar parking policies for elderly spouses. Within a week, the O'Connor Compassionate Parking Program was adopted by over 50 hospitals nationwide. Within a month, 2 state legislators had passed laws requiring all hospitals receiving state funding to provide compassionate parking accommodations for spouses of terminally ill patients. But perhaps most importantly, the video reached Thomas O'Connor's hospital room. His nurse showed him the video on her tablet, and Thomas, despite his weakened condition, cried as he watched his wife of 71 years defend their love in a courtroom. 3 days later, Judge Caprio visited Rhode Island Hospital to meet Thomas. Maggie was holding Thomas's hand when the judge arrived. "Mr. O'Connor," Judge Caprio said, "your wife came to court to ask permission to spend more time with you. She risked embarrassment and admitted to breaking rules because 71 years with you still isn't enough. You're a lucky man." Thomas, barely able to speak, squeezed his wife's hand and whispered, "I've been lucky for 71 years, Judge. Every day with Maggie was a gift." Thomas O'Connor passed away peacefully 5 days later. With Maggie holding his hand, his last words were, "71 years wasn't enough, but it was beautiful." At Thomas's funeral, Judge Caprio delivered a eulogy about the power of lifelong love and the importance of making sure that love is never interrupted by bureaucracy or regulations that don't account for the human heart. Thomas and Maggie O'Connor showed us what it means to
Choose someone every day for 71 years. Judge Caprio said Maggie's willingness to face a judge, to admit to breaking rules, to risk everything for 15 more minutes with Thomas, that's what love looks like when it's been tested by 7 decades and proven true. The O'Connor Legacy Fund, established after the courtroom video went viral, has since helped over 300 elderly couples spend dying days together without worrying about parking tickets, hospital regulations, or financial barriers to final moments. And guys, I want to ask you something that I know both Judge Caprio and Maggie would want me to ask. In the comments below, tell us about the long marriages in your life. Who are the couples who have shown you what lifelong love looks like? Because Maggie and Thomas O'Connor proved that true love doesn't fade with time. It deepens, it strengthens, and it becomes so powerful that even death can't diminish it. If this story touched your heart, if Maggie's unwavering love for Thomas and Judge Caprio's kindness reminded you what compassion truly means, please share this video with every couple, every family member, and every soul who believes in the power of love that never fades. Because some moments in life are worth more than any fine, any rule, any regulation. Maggie didn't park for convenience, she paused for love. For 1 more minute, holding the hand of the man she chose 71 years ago. Judge Frank Caprio showed us once again why
His legacy goes far beyond the bench. His wisdom reminds us that justice is not just about laws. It's about humanity. Margaret O'Connor taught us that age doesn't end devotion, and Judge Caprio reminded us that compassion doesn't weaken justice. It defines it. If you believe that some rules can bend when love stands firm, stay with us here on Case Closed, where every story celebrates the heart behind the law and honors the judges, like Frank Caprio, who proved that true justice begins with empathy.